The B-17 shudders like it's about to tear itself apart. Flak bursts bloom in the sky, black, violet flowers exploding just off the left wing. One detonates close enough that the aircraft bucks. The sound isn't a bang. It's a deep, concussive whump that you feel in your chest before you hear it. Inside the bomber, the temperature is well below freezing. Frost clings to oxygen lines. The wind screams through holes where aluminum skin used to be. "Hydraulics gone," someone shouts. Second Lieutenant Robert Hale, co-pilot of Lucky Lady, grips the yoke harder than he thought possible. Warning lights flicker. The aircraft is losing altitude, slowly at first, then faster. You can almost feel the vibration through the floor as one engine coughs, sputters, then keeps running out of sheer stubbornness. They're still over Germany, and the plane is dying. The B-17 Flying Fortress was supposed to be able to take this. That was the promise. 4 engines, heavy armor, self-sealing fuel tanks, enough 50 caliber guns to make enemy fighters think twice. But up here, surrounded by flak and Focke-Wulfs, fury means nothing. The nose section has been hit, plexiglass shattered. The bombardier is bleeding from the scalp, still conscious, still helping. The ball turret gunner reports shrapnel damage. Control cables feel soft. Soft is bad. Somewhere over the intercom, the pilot's voice cuts through the chaos. Calm. Too calm. We're turning back. That's the moment the crew exhales, just a little. Turning back doesn't mean safe. It means trying to survive the next 4 hours with a wounded aircraft. Over hostile territory, bleeding oil, fuel, and hope. Hale glances at the wing. A jagged hole the size of a dinner table gapes just behind the engine nacelle. The metal around it is curled outward like peeled skin. Air rips through it, tearing insulation loose inside the wing. He knows enough to understand what that means. Structural damage. If it gets worse, the wing could fold. You don't ditch a B-17 at altitude. You fall. Hours later, the English coast finally appears through cloud breaks like a mirage. By the time Lucky Lady limps toward its base in East Anglia, the aircraft is barely holding together. The landing is violent. The tires slam. The bomber swerves. Brakes scream. One engine dies the instant the wheels touch down, as if it was only waiting for permission. When the aircraft finally stops, silence rushes in. Then, cheering. Crewmen laugh, shout, clap each other on the back. One of them kisses the cold aluminum fuselage before climbing down. They lived. But as the ground crew approaches, the smiles fade. Technical Sergeant Joe Mallory stops dead in his tracks. Mallory has been working B-17s since before the war. He's seen flak damage. He's seen fighters chew aircraft apart. This is different. He walks slowly around the wing, boots crunching on frost and gravel. He reaches up and touches the torn metal. It flexes under his fingers. Too much. Someone whistles low behind him. That bird shouldn't have made it back. Mallory doesn't answer, because he's thinking the same thing. By spring of 1943, 8th Air Force losses are climbing at an unsustainable rate. Daylight bombing raids over Germany are exacting a price no one fully anticipated. Crews are brave, aircraft are tough, but the damage coming back from missions is catastrophic. Wings with missing ribs, fuselages stitched together by bullet holes, control surfaces barely responding, hydraulic systems held together by pressure and prayer. Officially, aircraft like Lucky Lady should be written off, scrapped, parts salvaged, airframe condemned. Mallory knows the regulations by heart. He also knows something else. Tomorrow morning, another mission is scheduled, and there aren't enough bombers. Mallory wipes grease from his hands and looks up at the wing again. He imagines the stress at altitude, the vibration, the load during evasive maneuvers. A proper repair would require parts they don't have, time they don't have, approval that won't come fast enough. But an idea begins to form. It's not in any technical manual. It's not approved by Boeing. And if an officer saw it, Mallory might find himself court-martialed. He turns to his crew. "Get me scrap aluminum," he says quietly. "Angle stock, rivets, anything that'll hold." One of the younger mechanics hesitates. "Sarge, that wing." "I know," Mallory snaps. Then softer. "I know." He takes one last look at the bomber, at the crew climbing down, alive because that wing held just long enough. Mallory exhales. "If we don't try," he says, "they won't make it back next time." As the sun dips behind the hangars, Mallory kneels under the wounded wing and starts marking metal with chalk. What he's about to do has no authorization, no testing, no guarantee. But if it works, it could mean the difference between men coming home or disappearing into the sky over Germany. And the higher command has no idea what's about to happen on this quiet English airfield. The hangar smells of oil, cold metal, and cigarette smoke. It's well past midnight when Technical Sergeant Joe Mallory finally straightens his back and steps away from the wing. His hands are raw, his knuckles split and blackened with grease. A thin sheen of sweat freezes on his neck the moment he stops moving. Floodlights cast hard shadows across the bomber's torn skin. What he's built looks wrong. Mallory knows it the instant he sees it from a distance. Strips of scrap aluminum, cut from damaged panels and abandoned aircraft, have been riveted across the wing's torn section like crude splints. Reinforcing ribs fashioned from angle stock run perpendicular to the airflow, distributing stress away from the fractured spar. It isn't pretty. It isn't factory. It is strong. One of the mechanics taps the reinforcement with a wrench. The sound is dull, solid. "Jesus," someone mutters. "That'll never pass inspection." Mallory lights a cigarette with shaking fingers. "It doesn't need to," he says. "It just needs to get them home." Official doctrine says frontline mechanics follow the book. Reality laughs at doctrine. By 1943, the daylight bombing campaign is turning into a war of attrition. Not just against German fighters and flak, but against physics itself. Aircraft are flying longer, higher, deeper. Damage is no longer clean or predictable, and replacement airframes aren't arriving fast enough. So men like Mallory adapt, quietly, unofficially, illegally. He's not the only one. Across East Anglia, ground crews begin improvising repairs that would make stateside engineers cringe. Hydraulic lines rerouted through bomb bays, control cables spliced instead of replaced, armor plate welded where it was never meant to be. They call them field fixes, but behind closed doors, pilots call them something else: miracles. The next morning, Lucky Lady sits on the hard stand under a pale gray sky. The crew circles the aircraft slowly. Lieutenant Hale stops beneath the wing, staring up at the patchwork of metal. "Tell me the truth, Sarge," he says. "Is she going to hold?" Mallory exhales smoke through his nose. "She held yesterday," he says. This just makes sure she remembers how. Hale doesn't smile, but he nods. That's enough. At 0600 hours, engines roar to life across the field. Another mission, another target. This time, Kiel. The bomber shudders as it taxis. Mallory watches every vibration, every flex of the reinforced wing. He knows exactly where the stress points are. He imagines rivets shearing loose one by one at altitude. The aircraft lifts off. Mallory doesn't breathe until the wheels are up. 8 hours later, the radio crackles. Aircraft returning. One by one, bombers stagger back into view, some trailing smoke, others flying unnervingly low. Ground crews fan out, counting silhouettes. Then, Lucky Lady appears, still flying, still whole. The wing holds. Mallory closes his eyes. Word spreads the only way it can in wartime. Quietly, mechanics talk. Pilots ask questions. Someone mentions a patch job that worked. Someone else mentions a reinforcement trick that kept a wing from folding. Soon, Mallory finds himself surrounded. "Hey Sarge, what'd you do on that left wing? You think it'd work on a fuselage hit? What about elevator damage?" Mallory never writes anything down. He shows them instead. Hands on, one aircraft at a time. The fixes evolve. Some are crude, some are elegant. All of them are born of necessity, and all of them violate regulations. Eventually, someone notices. A captain from maintenance command arrives unannounced, clipboard in hand. He walks the line, inspecting aircraft, brows furrowing. He stops under a bomber wing, runs a finger along a rivet line that doesn't belong. "What's this?" he asks. Mallory doesn't flinch. "Field reinforcement, sir." "That wasn't approved." "No, sir." The captain looks up at the aircraft, at the patchwork metal, at the squadron markings, freshly repainted after another mission. "How many sorties since the repair?" he asks. "4, Mallory replies. The captain closes his clipboard, walks away. Nothing more is said. By late summer, the 8th Air Force is flying deeper into Germany than ever before. Losses are still high, but something has changed. Aircraft that should have been lost are returning. Crews that should have bailed out are climbing down onto English soil instead. Unofficially, commanders begin to expect it. "Bring her back," pilots are told. "We'll fix her." And they do, with scrap, with nerve, with solutions no engineer ever designed, but war demanded. Then comes October 14th, 1943, Schweinfurt. The worst day yet. Flak density is unbelievable. Fighters swarm the formations. Bombers fall from the sky in flames. When the survivors limp home, the damage is unlike anything Mallory has ever seen. Wings torn open, tail sections hanging by control cables, entire sections of fuselage shredded. One aircraft taxis in trailing smoke, its left wing visibly sagging. Mallory runs toward it. As the engines shut down, the reinforced metal groans. Cracks spread. And then, with the crew already out, the wing collapses onto the tarmac in a shriek of tearing aluminum. The field goes silent. Mallory stares at the wreckage. His fix worked, but only just. And now the question hangs in the cold air. How much longer can these unsafe repairs keep defying physics before they finally fail in the sky? The wing lies twisted on the tarmac like a fallen limb. For a long moment, no one speaks. Then a crewman laughs, short, sharp, and hollow. The kind of laugh that only comes when fear finally releases its grip. "If that had happened 10 minutes earlier," he says, trailing off. Mallory doesn't join in. He crouches beside the wreckage, running his hand along the torn reinforcement. The rivets didn't shear. The metal didn't buckle the way he expected. The stress simply exceeded everything. It held until the aircraft stopped flying, exactly as intended. That knowledge should feel like victory. Instead, it weighs on him, because it means the line is thinner than he ever wanted to admit. The Schweinfurt missions change everything. Losses force 8th Air Force leadership to reconsider tactics. Escort fighters don't have the range yet. Bombers are flying into the heart of Germany alone. And on the ground, mechanics like Mallory are fighting a quieter battle, one measured in ounces of metal and inches of reinforcement. Every repair is a calculation, not just of strength, but of trust. Pilots begin visiting the maintenance areas before missions, not to complain, not to demand, to look. They run their hands over patched wings, peer into bomb bays lit by work lamps, exchange glances with mechanics that say more than words ever could. You are holding my life together. Mallory feels it every time. Second Lieutenant Hale returns from another mission with fresh damage. Flak holes pepper the fuselage. One elevator control feels sluggish. Hale finds Mallory under the tail section. "Be straight with me," he says. "If this was your aircraft, would you fly it?" Mallory doesn't answer immediately. He checks the control linkage again, tightens a bolt, steps back. "Yes," he says finally, "but I'd keep her smooth. No heroics." Hale nods. "That's all I needed." The fixes grow bolder. Where once Mallory reinforced only structural elements, now he reroutes systems. Hydraulic pressure lines run through non-standard paths. Armor plate salvaged from wrecked aircraft is bolted behind pilot seats. None of it exists on any blueprint. All of it works. Sort of. One mechanic jokes that they're no longer maintaining bombers. They're coaxing them. Rumors reach headquarters. An engineering officer arrives from the United States, sent to investigate irregular maintenance practices. He wears clean boots and a pressed uniform. Mallory meets him beside a patched B-17. "This reinforcement changes stress distribution," the officer says coolly. "You're risking catastrophic failure." Mallory meets his gaze. "Sir," he says, "that aircraft took direct flak hits at 27,000 feet and brought 10 men home. Catastrophic failure would have been not trying." The officer hesitates. Then he asks for the sortie records and quietly copies them. By early 1944, something remarkable happens. The fixes begin to migrate upward. Factory kits arrive with reinforcement plates eerily similar to Mallory's scrap-built splints. Technical orders are revised. Damage tolerance thresholds quietly expand. No one mentions where the ideas came from, but the mechanics recognize their own work. War has a way of legitimizing what works. Then comes the winter. Cold, unlike anything they've known. Metal contracts. Hydraulic fluid thickens. Engines resist starting. Damage that might have held in summer now threatens to fail. Mallory lies awake at night, thinking about rivet lines and temperature gradients. On January mornings, he watches bombers lift off heavy with fuel, patched wings flexing against the cold air. Every takeoff feels like a gamble. On February 20th, 1944, Big Week begins. Hundreds of bombers surge into the sky, escorted deeper into Germany than ever before. This is the turning point, or the breaking point. Aircraft return with horrific damage, but they return. And among them, Lucky Lady again. Shot through, scarred, alive. Hale climbs down slower this time. He looks older, tired. He finds Mallory and presses something into his hand. A piece of flak, bent, blackened. "She hit us right where you reinforced," Hale says. "Didn't even notice it until landing." Mallory closes his fingers around the metal. For the first time, he allows himself a small smile. But the war is not finished, and the margin for error is shrinking. As the bombing campaign intensifies, the question is no longer whether these unsafe fixes can save lives. It's how many lives they can save before the cost finally comes due. Because every miracle has a limit, and somewhere over Germany, physics is still waiting. March 1944. The airfield is already awake before dawn. Engines cough and catch in the dark. Propellers flash silver in the floodlights. Men move with the quiet urgency of routine, the kind that only comes when fear has been lived with long enough to become familiar. Mallory stands beneath Lucky Lady one last time. The aircraft is heavier now. More reinforcement, more patches. A bomber built less by Boeing than by survival. Hale climbs aboard without ceremony. No speeches, no bravado, just a nod. The target today lies deep. Too deep, some say. Ball bearing factories again. Flak belts layered like armor. Fighters waiting beyond the escort's reach. At altitude, the formation tightens. Vapor trails streak the sky. Below them, Germany unrolls in gray winter geometry. Then, the flak starts. It's thicker than before, louder, smarter. A burst detonates just off Lucky Lady's right wing. The aircraft lurches. Alarms scream. Control response goes sluggish. Hale adjusts trim. Gentle, precise. He remembers Mallory's words. No heroics. A second burst punches into the reinforced section. Metal shrieks, but it holds. The bomber stays in formation. A Messerschmitt flashes past the nose, guns blazing. The top turret responds. Tracers arc. The fighter peels away. Inside the wing, the patch structure flexes under load, distributing stress along improvised ribs that were never meant to exist, but now do. You can almost hear the metal arguing with the air, and winning. Hours later, on the return leg, an engine begins to overheat. Oil pressure drops. Hale throttles back, feathering the prop. The bomber falls slightly behind the formation. That's when the fighters come. A lone FW-190 lines up on the damaged wing. The first burst rips into the reinforcement. Rivets tear loose. A panel peels back, but the wing does not fail. The bomber shudders, staggers, and keeps flying. The tail gunner opens fire. The fighter breaks off. Silence follows, the kind that leaves your ears ringing. When Lucky Lady finally crosses the English coast, she's flying crooked, but she's flying. The landing is rough. The reinforced wing sags visibly. As the engines shut down, metal creaks in protest. Then, stillness. The crew climbs out slowly, reverently, as if afraid to anger the aircraft. Mallory reaches the wing just as the last man steps down. He places his hand against the patched metal. It's warm, still alive. That night, a message circulates through maintenance channels. Field reinforcement techniques are to be formally evaluated. Effective immediately. No reprimands, no courts-martial. The war has made its decision. By summer, long-range fighters escort the bombers. Losses drop. The pressure eases, just enough. Mallory keeps working, but the urgency is different now. He knows they've crossed the most dangerous stretch. Years later, when veterans gather and stories are told, they talk about flak and fighters and frozen skies. Few mention the men on the ground. Fewer still mention the illegal fixes, the sleepless nights, the scrap-built solutions that bent the rules, and the laws of engineering, just far enough. Mallory never wrote his name on an aircraft, but pieces of his work crossed Germany and came back, again and again and again. The war ends. Aircraft are scrapped. The patches disappear. But the men who flew remember the feel of a wing that should not have held and did. Because somewhere, a mechanic refused to accept the manual as the final word. And because of that refusal, hundreds of airmen came home. End.